Author of Hidden History, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, and Survival of the Richest, Donald Jeffries separates the real from the unreal. Fact from fiction. Fact from fiction. Reverse engineering our manufactured reality. And now, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., this is I Protest with Donald Jeffries.
And welcome to I Protest with Donald Jeffries. As the man says, I'm coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as I do every Friday at this time, 5 p.m. Eastern. We're live streaming on my YouTube channel until they decide to strike me again. We're also on rockfin.com live. We're on freeworld.fm as well. So join us in the chat, whatever. I monitor the YouTube mostly because I can put the comments on the screen. So hope to see a bunch of you in here. We have a very special guest. Nick Mancuso should be a name known to moviegoers everywhere. Just a wonderful actor that has been around for quite a while. If you look at his IMDb screen credits, they're very impressive. He's probably, I guess most people probably know him for starring as the star of the 80s cult television series Stingray. Which I think was only on for a couple seasons, but most people seem to remember that. He's been in lots of other stuff. So, and he's a Renaissance man. He's an artist. He's well-read. He likes my work, so he must be brilliant, right? So, Nick Mancuso, welcome to the show. It's great to talk to you again.
Donald, it is a great pleasure to be here. As you can see, I'm in the dark. I've spent a lifetime in front of the camera, and I'm tired of it. So you're just going to get a black picture.
I understand. Well, look him up. There's lots of sexy pictures of Nick. Nick was a studly young guy back in the day. I think you said your first film, weren't you the romantic lead opposite?
No. My very first film, Don, was actually one of the very first I ever did. Was a film called Black Christmas, which is a huge cult hit.
I've seen that. Yeah. Andrea Martin from SCTV was in it.
Well, I was the voice of Billy. Yeah. It's me, Billy. And it was it was the weirdest thing because it's probably one of the most successful films I ever did. Back in 71, I was just a kid doing theater in Toronto, what we referred to in those days as underground theater, because we were a bunch of kids right out of college, some of us, and some from the theater schools and so forth, that just kind of collected on the streets of Toronto back in the 60s when the big sort of spiritual and revolution was occurring, and we were all going to throw off our chains and open up to this brand new world. It was the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Hair was in the air. We were all protesting the war in Vietnam and growing our hair long, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan and Jim Morrison and all that, wonderful, hopeful balderdash of extraordinary explosions into the universe was going around. And I was doing this theater, this kind of revolutionary theater. We were doing street theater. We were doing audience participation theater. We were doing all kinds of stuff, and just had kind of collected together. And at that time, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, not the father, not the son, but the father, who I knew, who was an extraordinarily intelligent, extraordinary man, who, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but he was a brilliant guy, and he set up the programs not unlike what FDR did in the United States with the Works programs for the arts. And that's what created the theater movement in Canada, which then resulted in the film movement, and then resulted in the American film movement moving up to Canada because of the price. Everything moved to Toronto and Vancouver in the mid-'80s. But at that particular point in time, it was just a bunch of kids. We were getting these broken down old warehouses and putting in theaters, or we would do it in church basements and so forth. And during that period of time, I remember that summer, I had, of course, like all fledgling wannabe artists, flat broke, of course, and living on tomatoes that were growing in the backyard. And I got a job to do a film called Black Christmas, and I met Bob Clark, the director, a wonderful man, a wonderful director, and a wonderful man. And he said, okay, here I want you to come up with a voice of some kind. I sit in a chair over there with your back to me, and I'm just going to listen. So I started making all these weird sounds and growls and this and that and so forth. He said, okay, great, you got the part. And so I began to do this crazy psychopathic killer called Billy, who is calling up the sorority house and terrorizing the girls. And of course, in the cast was Margot Kidder, who's a wonderful actress, Andrea Martin, and from SCTV, the great comedy show, and so forth.
Olivia Hussey, wasn't Olivia Hussey in it?
Olivia Hussey, of course, starred in it with Keir Dullea. Keir Dullea had done Kubrick's, 2001, and so, and of course I know, so I just stood on my head and made this bizarre kind of bunch of sounds, and the film came, and kind of people sort of, just kind of, oh yeah, fine a little horror movie along with, this is the beginning of the slasher movies. Friday the 13th hadn't come out yet. These horror movies that have been in existence now, leading all the way to the Zombieville universe that we now live in, had not yet existed. So it was really the very first. And strangely enough, that film had such a powerful impact because there's a huge community of people around the world that love that film. And it plays every Christmas, which is like, now doesn't that tell you something about the nature of our times?
Yeah.
That it play that in my time it was Alistair Sim in A Christmas Carol, a beautiful film, and of course it was Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. What a great film that was. And now it's Black Christmas, about a psychopathic killer who kills all girls, and they all scream and die, and everybody loves it. It says something about our age.
Was that Bob Clark, the same one who did Christmas Story?
Yes, exactly. Bob Clark did. Yeah. Unfortunately, he died young in an accident.
Yes, with his son, I think, or something.
With his son, yeah.
I think I mentioned that in Unbarred Family. Very strange.
He was a Texan, actually. He somehow ended up in Canada, in Toronto at that time. A bunch of Americans had come up during that period because the war in Vietnam actually had a lot of people, a lot of draft dodgers came up to Toronto. And in fact, in many ways, the Canadian theater movement was actually triggered by a lot of these draft dodgers. The American draft dodgers came up there, were highly creative, very principled people that refused to fight an immoral war, which it was, of course. It was the first of the many immoral wars that have been, unfortunately, who knew back in the 60s that the stuff that we thought was science fiction would in fact become real. And it is real. People that were not born in that generation, of course, have no idea. The 60s is like, now I think about the 60s as someone would a lot in the last century, when people would say, in 1862, I was wending my way through the Oregon Trail.
What was the hippie? One of the hippies later said something like, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there, or something. What was that quote?
Yeah. If you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. And of course, we did all that stuff. We did all that crazy. But that crazy opening up of consciousness, you might say, because it was a kind of an experimental time in human existence, that led to really a kind of opening in the approach to life itself, because it became ultimately a spiritual movement that resulted in a tremendous amount of change in society, in America, and consequently in the world. If you think about the fall of communism, and which at that time seemed like an absolute impossibility, talking about the 50s and the 60s.
Sure.
The Cold War, of course, I was, in my generation, we all had to do drills to,
Duck and cover, yeah, sure.
tuck and cover, because the atom bomb was going to go off, and it could have. Had it not been for Kennedy, had it not been for his negotiations with
Right.
Khrushchev,
Yeah.
we might have actually gone to nuclear war.
And he's
at
the only
that
one that
point.
wanted it. He's the only one. All the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he and
Yes.
Bobby alone, they
Oh
all,
yes.
every one of them wanted.
Yeah. Let's kill. Let's get them commies. Yeah, sure. Here. Here comes the nuclear. Come on, wake up, kids. And now, of course, it's starting all over again. People are seriously talking about tactical nuclear weapons. Are you joking?
And the enemy's the same. We're back to Russia again.
Oh, it's always been. But you know what, Don? It's always been the same enemy. If you really look at history, and I'm not only of that generation, but I was, I guess I had a very unusual background, because I was born in a small town in the south of Italy, in the mountains of Calabria, and the language I spoke, which is the Solo Calabrian, the language of my grandmother, that had been the language for thousands of years, it's almost gone. It's almost disappeared. And the world I grew up in was biblical in nature, and for real. We didn't have electricity. It was there were donkeys and goats and chickens and pigs and I think one person had a car somewhere 100 miles away. There was an electric tram. There was a tram that did go from my mountain town to the coastline, and in those days, of course, when I migrated in 1953. It was like going to the moon. It was like when we left my small town. I remember I was so, of course, as a child, looking forward to what this world was, what America was all about. I'd been told, by the old women, that apparently in America, that the sky was low, and so people had to bend down, because the sky was low, and so I imagined all these, and there was a lot of chimneys, so I imagined all these chimney stacks with the smoke going sideways, and people walking around, and thought to myself, "Oh my God, I don't want to go there. This is terrible. What am I going to do? There's going to be nothing there." So I came from that land of color and tremendous life force. It was Greek, it was Saracen, it was Viking, it was all the.
Well, you must have some great food, though, right? I mean, Italian cuisine.
Oh, the best. Absolutely, the best. Absolutely, I had all that. So I was worried about that. So I thought, what I would do is I would bring watermelon seeds and hide them in my pocket so I could plant them once I came to America. So so having had that kind of background, and then ending up in Canada, and then learning English from Bugs Bunny cartoons, and then suddenly becoming inculcated into a culture that I hated, despised, and becoming that kind of transforming myself from one very different kind of culture to another. I think is what finally led me to becoming an actor, because my interest really was not acting. My interest was science, physics, electronics, that kind of stuff. I was into Nikola Tesla when I was 12 years old. I was into Albert Einstein. I actually built a Tesla coil with a friend of mine when I was 12, and I was into Albert Einstein when I was 10, I joined, and I started the Ayn Rand Society when I was 16. So I was, and reading Count Alfred Korzybski when I was 17. So I had a very unusual mind. Certainly not the kind of mind that should go into showbiz by any stretch.
I'll say, when you went to showbiz,
it was a purely neurotic impulse. I was an incredibly unhappy child. I came from my background was very difficult. My mother was not well, and my father was a man of honor, a very solid, very powerful, very disciplined. Came from a society and came from a world, coming right back to the fascists of Italy, and that period of time that produced men like that, and produced men that were men of iron, and discipline, and the whole thing is that.
What did he think of Mussolini?
Well, of course, he absolutely admired him. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Him and my brother and his brothers.
Well, so did Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound, one of our most
Ezra
renowned
Pound,
poets.
of course he did.
He served
Ezra
10
Pound.
years in a mental institution for supporting him later.
Well, it was either that or be shot for treason.
Yes.
He feigned insanity, and during that period of time, was able to get a book written by one of his students. I think his name was Mullins, who
Eustace
wrote the book.
Mullins, the father
Eustace
of the Federal
Mullins,
Reserve. Yes, yeah.
Who wrote the entire story of the Federal Reserve and what really happened to America in 1933 and 1913, Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
When the Federal Reserve was created, which is neither federal nor a reserve, and it's got nothing to do with it's got nothing that is good in it for the American people or anybody else. It's about profit. And why shouldn't it be? Of course, this world is only about profit, right?
And it's legalized.
There's the trillionaires, and then there's the rest of us worms, right?
Exactly. Well, when you go into Hollywood, here you are a student of Tesla.
Well, I was an idiot. I was a complete fool. I mean, I was such a jerk. I ended up, doing the underground theater for years and years, and of course I was doing all the Beckett and Anouilh and all the Ionesco and all that stuff, that wonderful broth of creativity that, that really was part of the world, just extraordinary stuff. Shakespeare, of course, was the guy that really triggered me. I mean, triggered me. I became an actor because, unfortunately, I was put in Hamlet when I was 16, and I ended up being forced to by the theater teacher, by the drama English teacher, to join the drama club. And I didn't even know what drama was, because I used to have a very powerful memory. And so he put me in, and I'm going, I don't know what this is. And so he made me Laertes, and a friend of mine played Hamlet, and a wonderful actor who unfortunately has passed on. And then I heard Sir John Gielgud's recording of Hamlet, which blew me away. And then, because I was into electronics, I took a little record player. In those days, there were no tapes or anything. There was, but barely. And I put it on repeat, and I hooked up a little earphone, and I slept with Sir John Gielgud's Hamlet playing in my ears. Who's there? Bernardo, Dehi. 'Tis a cold and bitter night, and I'm sick at heart. And there's Gielgud going, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous that this player here, and all that. And I thought that's what acting was. So for years I would, whenever I did a stage play, I'd go like this, because, I thought that's what actors did. And so a very unusual and bizarre. And then I memorized the entire play, almost, and carried it in my pocket for years. And I became obsessed with him. And that obsession is really why I started acting. And why did I do that? Because I was a scared, skinny, frightened, terrified immigrant kid living in a very, very difficult family situation. My mother not being well mentally, and my father being in a society that completely, I had nothing to connect to. I used to get chased and beaten up by the kids, or they tried to beat me up. And, I was a good Christian boy. So, I was told I wasn't supposed to fight. So I just stand there and the kids would jump on me and all that. Until finally one day I went, what, screw you. Boom. And I hit one of the kids, knocked him across the room. The other kids went, oh, and they stayed away from me. Yeah. But unfortunately, that is absolutely the wrong kind of attitude. My mother was right. Because that kind of, insanity, that kind of unfortunate aggressiveness, which is so much part of the ethos of the North American life.
Yeah.
It is also in the ethos of Europe, I'm in Europe. Europe, the streets of Paris, here where I am, were flowing with blood in the 12th century and the St. Bartholomew massacres. The Nazis were here only 80 years ago, dragging the Jews out and shooting partisans against the walls. You can still see the bullet holes in many of the buildings that were left there on purpose. So there's a very different kind of reality. Of course, France is the basis of America because les droits des hommes, the rights of man, were founded here. Jefferson was here. The French helped with the creation of the American Revolution, and the creation of America itself. But you see, it's just mankind, isn't it? I mean, it really is the issue of just. It's what Conrad Lawrence, the writer, wrote in a book called, I think it was Janus, where he argued that there was something essentially aggressive within the condition of the human being. And his argument was this. He said that the single most important day in the history of mankind was the day America dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. And he said from that point on, the clock to extinction had been turned on. Why? Because he said, and he's right, he said, in the history of the world, no weapon has ever been created that's only been used once. So we are in rather, shall we say, difficult times, or as the Chinese would say, interesting times.
They're interesting.
And I'm not bored. Are you, Don?
No,
I'm not bored.
if this was
maybe
science,
the people listening,
if this would be a science fiction movie, we didn't have to live in it. It would be incredible. But you're coming to us from Paris.
Well, that's okay, Donald. We're going back home. We're going back to Mars. Okay, Mars is waiting for us. It's there. We left it. We left it. What, 200 million years ago when it exploded, and we moved here, to get away. And now we're going back. We're just going home, and we're going to set it all up. And of course, that is very possible. You know that Elon Musk. Is doing something that in fact could work for real, and he is right about interplanetary, travel, and that in fact we have to. It is in the nature of consciousness and the nature of beingness. Of course, this universe is filled. Of course it is. There's no doubt about it, and probably they are here with us and amongst us. I'm a follower of Dr. Stephen Greer, who I think is an extraordinary man, and who's done some extraordinary work, and probably is standing on what is the single most important thing in our time, which is that once we do establish the reality of contact with the various beings that do exist, and we have access to the technology which is real, which is the technology that Nikola Tesla had come up with in 1899, 1901, 1903, zero-point energy. He built the very first electric car in 1906, and it didn't run with a huge battery. The size, what made it work was something the size of a cell phone, because it wasn't a battery. It operated on zero-point energy, and apparently even gave a demonstration of one of these machines to Congress and showed them, look, we can do this. And they all went, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, J.P. Morgan just told us that Standard Oil is going to be making all this moolah for us. And they didn't give a damn, And people, see, that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, if people can't see it or hear it or know it and understand it, then, it's like playing a radio station on frequency, on a beautiful frequency that nobody can hear. If they can't hear it, then, if they don't get it, how are you going to say, well, who's Nikola Tesla? Well, he did build Niagara Falls, kids. He's the guy that came up with AC, alternating current. He lit Buffalo, New York, Toronto, and lit up the world. And he did come up with, the X-rays and the neon, the first electromagnetic signals. And yes, the radio before Marconi, only his could communicate worldwide. It's like, but you tell people like this, and they look at you like you're crazy. And
I think Tesla has more. Tesla has more people, I think, interested in him now than because
now.
We know that he had those files that were very interesting, and he'd said he developed free energy for all. And then Donald Trump's uncle, was sent by the government for some reason.
What happened was this: after he did the Wardenclyffe experiments, right, which is where he was really going to absolutely pull in the energy of the electromagnetic field of the planet Earth, which is huge. And that's what it was about. And then it was also be able to not only transmit, but receive. And he was in Boulder, Colorado, and he actually, it was the mad scientist scene, electricity everywhere, and, and he actually blew out the city, blew out the electric grid. He then came back and he set up the Wardenclyffe experiments, I think it was in Jersey. And by this point, Tesla had been the creator of Westinghouse, because Westinghouse was the businessman that backed him. That when Tesla was working for Edison, and Edison, and he was solving all of these problems for Edison and all that. And Edison at one particular point said to him, "You're a pretty smart kid, aren't you? All right, here's a problem. I got something for you. You go down there, and if you can fix that." He had a ship that was running on direct current, and it had blown up because with DC things like burn up. You got to have wires that are as thick as your arm to transmit any amount of energy. And so they blow up and burn up and all that. So he goes there and he fixes it, and he said, "If you can fix that, I'll give you $50,000, $50,000." So Tesla does. He works on it for a year, solves the problem, and then he goes to Edison and says, "Well, Mr. Edison, I did it for you, and can I have my money, please?" And Edison goes, "Give you your money? What are you talking about? That was just a joke. Don't you understand American humor?" And Tesla says, "I'm very sorry, Mr. Edison, but I must leave. I will quit." And he quits. And he works as a ditch digger in New York City. And while he's doing that, his ideas had been spreading around. There was this crazy, Serbian genius by the name of Nikola Tesla. This guy Westinghouse was smart enough to realize this guy was onto something, looks him up, finds him, and says, "Look, I'll back you." And so he backs Tesla, and they start doing alternating current stuff, right? And the Chicago exhibition of whatever it was, I can't remember what it was, 1890 something, was lit up by Nikola Tesla. There as it is, alternating current. And then this war starts between Edison and Tesla as to who is going to get the control of the electric so forth. And Edison, of course, being a showman, would go on stage with elephants and electrocute them.
Yes.
To point out to the world how dangerous alternating current was. Well, it didn't work, because they managed to actually build Niagara Falls and alternating current. And that's why we have the world we have, thanks to Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Now, but Tesla took all of his money. He had a percentage of Westinghouse. He would have made a fortune. Westinghouse got himself into trouble. And, so he said to Tesla, "Listen, I can't afford to, can you give me a break and let me have it?" And Tesla let him have the money. So he kept spending all the money he had made from Westinghouse on these new inventions, on this extraordinary stuff. And Westinghouse got bought up by J.P. Morgan, the one and only. And J.P. Morgan, of course, was all about oil and the railroads and all that stuff, and money. There you go again. And so he backs Tesla and his experiments, the Wardenclyffe and so forth, and trying to figure out what this crazy guy was doing. And when he sat with Tesla, and Tesla explained to him that what he was doing was creating an infinite source of energy for mankind, where you could collect energy anywhere on the planet, anywhere. And you could just literally put this thing down, and there would be just constant energy. And Morgan said to him, "Well, how am I going to charge him? Money." And Tesla said, "You're not, sir, Mr. Morgan. This is for mankind." And Morgan went, "Mankind? Oh, okay. All right there, buddy boy." And the next thing you know, somebody had burnt down Nikola Tesla's laboratory. And the next thing you know, all of his money disappeared. And the next thing you know, he was reduced to a pauper, living in I think the New Yorker.
Yeah.
And and his only friends were pigeons. And he continued doing his research until he died. Now, here's the thing. He was, what, 80 something?
Yes.
Here's the thing. He actually designed a machine, and I know this because I actually was on a model of this machine through a series of very strange circumstances by a man who had actually seen the original machine by Tesla when an old man in New Jersey, when he was a kid, showed him this machine. And it was Tesla's machine. It was an electrostatic machine. And you could go on it, and basically what it would do is it would change the frequency of your body, because everything is frequency in the universe. Everything is frequency. That's what Tesla realized. Everything is frequency. And he managed to create a machine that actually could help the body heal itself and restore itself. The average cell is about 22 microvolts of energy. When you get sick, the battery, the volt itself, the voltage goes down, down, down. And at around 16 microvolts, you get cancer. If you can increase the energy of the body, because it's all about energy and frequency, you can actually restore yourself to health. And not only that, and I've used these machines because I restored myself from near death a number of years ago. And this particular machine was actually, believe it or not, one of the very first people to actually stand on it was one of Nikola Tesla's closest friends, Mark Twain. And Mark Twain actually stood on it. And Mark Twain had suffered from very severe, many, many, many severe problems, one of which was depression. And he felt so much, so this stuff is all real. It's not science fiction, kids. It's absolutely real. But the problem is that we're being denied access to this information. Now, what the hell has this got to do with acting? I haven't a clue. How did I become Stingray? I haven't a clue. I've done almost 200 films, 220 films. None of them, with the exception of the Under Siege movies with Steven Seagal, and the films I did with Brandon Lee, the martial arts movies, none of them made a cent, man. Not a cent. I mean, I did television, of course, which is sponsored. But
weren't you pretty well paid for Stingray as the star of that show?
Was I? Yeah, of course, yeah, of course. I mean, I made a tremendous amount of money before it was all stolen by my business manager, but we won't talk about that today, shall we? We won't discuss that. No, we won't discuss the Hollywood swampland or anything else, or what Randy Quaid referred to as the star whackers.
Yeah, I like it. Did you ever meet Randy Quaid? Have you ever had a chance to talk to him?
I did meet Randy Quaid. I met him for a short period of time. He did a film with a friend of mine, and so I got to do a little bit of, he's a wonderful guy, very talented actor, of course. And as you know, he woke up one morning and the house was gone, and the business manager and his lawyer had basically stolen. Well, guess what, kids? Yeah. It ain't. And then he said, "Hey, guess what? I'm not the only one. There's lots of actors have gone through this." Well, I can attest to that because I went through it. And he said they called them star whackers because he said they were killing some of them and stuff like that. And I didn't get killed exactly, but I came close to getting killed because the shock was so intense. I started going through extraordinary health crisis. But I have restored myself since then, and I'm back. I'm still around, and I'll be sticking around a little bit longer on planet Earth.
Well, you're in Paris now. That's we don't get too many guests from Paris. So talk about and I think we talked about this before, but I call America 2.0 the world's wealthiest banana republic. I think we're in absolutely third world. I think you told me before.
Well, no question about it. No question about it, of course. But you see, what I realize, of course, is that the Hunger Games is real, and that in fact, what Fritz Lang did in the film Metropolis in 1927, as the Nazis were coming to power, where he described a society of super, super rich and everybody else are slaves that are controlled by a robot. A gigantic robot is in fact reality. That's exactly what's going on with formation of AI and so forth, and hybrid realities and all that stuff. There is already a superclass of trillionaires and billionaires. More money is now in the hands and the pockets of the fewest number of people on planet Earth, and the separation set between rich and poor has never been greater. Our politicians, for the largest part, are basically jokers, clowns, marionettes, puppets, and so forth. They're not in charge. They're not in charge at all. The people that are in charge are in fact, and always have been, are the ones who control the money. It's all about the money. And as the Baron Rothschild said in 1796, give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not a whit which crown sits on which throne. Because it's always been about that.
You know all this stuff, and my audience is they're always familiar with this because this is a conspiracy friendly audience. What was it like in Hollywood? At what point were you aware of all this stuff? Were you talking about this stuff? Were you talking about the Rothschilds? People like that,
no. Listen, I was totally, I was completely obsessed with my career and acting and my marriages and stuff like that. But I continuously studied and read. I got into when I was in the 60s, I was a full-blown drug addict, alcoholic, and I went through all that. And at the age of 33, it was lifted. I had the great fortune of being, having survived a horrible disease. I still have it, and I work spiritual programs to keep myself on the straight and narrow of existence, because addiction is probably, and particularly in drugs or alcohol, of course, is the very, in my mind, the very you might say the great darkness or the great virus that has entered consciousness in America and has taken it down. The reason all this stuff has gone in my mind, and you don't do it through prohibition, and you don't do it with war on drugs, because you can't make war on yourself. It doesn't work that way. You have to find a spiritual path, and until you find that spiritual path, you will be either killed by it, dragged down by it, or destroyed. You cannot grow. You cannot manifest.
Nick, can you see this? Can you see the screen? I put a comment up there about. Can you see that?
I have to put on my.
I'll read it to you. It just
no.
My sister,
yeah.
my sister produced at least one movie with Nick. She is a producer with Pierre David and has been with him since 1991. Neil Zonich is his name and was a producer on Capture.
Oh my god! That's so funny.
How about that?
That is so funny. Well, Pierre David, who's a great guy, actually said to me on the phone the great line when I refused to do the lines at the end of the show. They were terrible. I said, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. We're going to rewrite this. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And Pierre was yelling at me and screaming and saying, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to make sure that you never get hired in Hollywood again. And it was like the scene with Dustin Hoffman and Tootsie. You know what I mean? I know. Nobody will work you. Let me tell you something. Nobody will work you. I was a tomato. Tomatoes don't sit down. That's incredible. Yeah, Captured. Yeah,
Small world.
Yeah, a lovely writer. What was his name? I can't remember now. He's a wonderful writer-director, actually. Marvelous individual. Interesting film. Yeah, interesting film. And among many of the ones that I did during that period of time, because basically, when it all turned, because, I started making a lot of these films. So, well, why'd you do this film, do that film? Well, because I had to put food on the table. That's why. And what else? It's like, why'd you do that part? Well, that's what was offered, man. It's like, and how come you didn't work with Marty Scorsese? Because he already had Robert De Niro. What are you talking about? What am I going to? It's like, what am I going to play? It's not to say that I was. I wrote a biography which I have to still finish and get published, called "Never Play the Indian."
Yeah.
And the first line of that book is, it says, in Hollywood there are cowboys and Indians. Never play the Indian. And it's true. Hollywood basically is cowboys and Indians, and there's white hats and black hats, and if you look at the history of Hollywood and so forth, because it's like you cannot there is not a racist exactly agenda in the sense of racism, but the reality is that it's always been. The Hollywood experience is basically about one thing and one thing only, which is a good thing to say, a very good thing to say. there is hope. There is hope. You know, you can do it. You can do it. That is one of the most wonderful messages that's ever been put out, other than the messages of Christ and the Bible, that there is hope. There is hope. But the problem is that if you look at the real history of Hollywood in terms of the manifestation of the actual films and so forth, you know, I'm not saying that because of the fact that you know, if you're Italian, I'm Italian. My name is Mancuso, you know, and I didn't play the boxer. I didn't play Rocky. You know what I'm saying? I didn't do that
You never
part.
played a monster. You didn't get to play a good.
You know, and I didn't do. You're looking at me. Are you looking at me? You know, nobody else here. You know, and all that. You know, there was a discussion between a friend of mine, R.H. Thompson, and Christopher Plummer, the great actor, Canadian actor, who, of course, disguised himself as an Englishman, as all great Canadians have in the past. And that is true, by the way. You put on the British accent. You know, when I was a young actor, Canada, one particular time, I pretended I was British for about a whole year. And so I spoke with an in order to get hired, because Canada still, you know, it's you know, that it was, when I grew up, there was the Dominion of Canada. And so at my time, it was like, I remember a director saying to me in Canada, as I was running a small theater in Halifax called Pure One Theater with a friend of mine. We were doing, quote, original Canadian plays. And at that time, there was no such thing as a Canadian play. And I ended up at the regional theater, and the regional theater did nothing but sort of British kind of things. You know, everything was kind of British, and British actors were always on stage, you know, and there was all that kind of, aren't you clever, dear boy, and all that. And I remember this director saying this to me, saying, "Oh, Nick, you're like a diamond in the rough. You could never do Shaw." And I thought, oh, really? Oh, I could never do Shaw. I see. It's because what? Because I'm, you know, because I'm a WAP, DP. Is that what it is? Oh, I'm supposed to play mafia guys. Oh, yeah, that's right. You know, the nature of acting is that the individual, the human being, manifests and portrays the human condition. The human condition, period. Of any type, anywhere, anyhow. That's the whole idea. But that's not what happens in reality, because people want to see, of course, the people that they know, that they can recognize, that they, you know, feel comfortable with. It's like what Paley said about the founder of CBS. What was that his name? Was it Paley? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, Bill Paley.
William Paley, who said CBS. He said, "I only want to have people on my network that I would allow into my home." Okay, so anyway, that's this whole separate issue. But in terms of casting and playing parts and all that, you know, I mean, you know, the actor manifests the human condition, and that's the way I was raised. So I was always aiming in that particular direction, which led me down some pretty sort of stupid roads, because I would turn down films that would be commercial successes for unknown and obscure pictures. Like the time Sam Peckinpah offered me, you know, one of the great Hollywood directors offered me Osterman Weekend, which was unfortunately his last movie, but I turned him down to do an unknown French-Canadian film called Maria Chapdelaine in French, you know, which is a film that did end up in the National Board of Review as one of the best 10 pictures of the year. You know, every year they take 10 pictures and they put them in a time vault. And this film, Maria Chapdelaine, is a beautiful film, gorgeous film, but nobody ever saw it. You know, I did a picture called Ticket to Heaven, which was about the Moonies, which won me the Canadian Oscar, and I was, you know, being nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe, and the head of the Golden Globe wanted to nominate me, but unfortunately the Canadians had waited too late and didn't fit the category, and it was disqualified by the Academy because it was no longer a foreign movie, because it had been released by MGM. Anyway, the point is, you know, the thing is this, you know, it's what Charlton Heston said to me. I worked with him on a picture called Motherlode with Kim Basinger. He said, you know, Nick, the trouble with the film business is that it's a business that's an art, and an art that's a business. And that's true. And he should know because he worked with Orson Welles, one of the true greats.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm rattling.
No, it's fascinating to hear, and but I'm interested in how because you were already interested in a lot of these kind of esoteric things with Tesla and so forth before you got to Hollywood. But out of all the people you knew, and you've known so many people, worked with so many people, which are just from my own curious point of view, what are some of the actors that you felt comfortable enough with to discuss these kinds of extreme,
No, not
controversial
really.
topics?
I mean, no. You don't have time to discuss anything when you're on
So
set.
none of them, yeah. But I mean that you became friends with or anything?
Yeah, I became friends with people like John Savage. You know, he's a wonderful man, a wonderful actor, and of course, he
Yes,
did
yeah.
some of the great American classics. He did Deer Hunter, you know, with Robert De Niro, Chris Walken. He did Thin Red Line. He did El Salvador. He did a wonderful performance. He should have really won an Oscar for. And I blank on where he played that police officer, you know, from the 60s, guy in New York, in LA. The hell was it called? Anyway, he's done tons and tons of film. He's a marvelous, marvelous actor. But, you know, I certainly connected with him. But in terms of having these kinds of, you might say, philosophic discussions, no, it doesn't happen. You know, acting is action, basically, you know, and I was, an action actor in many ways. You know, in Stingray, I did, I studied Aikido, you know, and I did a lot of jumping and running and hanging from buildings and all that kind of stuff, which is fun, you know, and riding horses and all that, and fighting with swords. You know, I did a film in Czechoslovakia, you know, from the Middle Ages. I was in full armor, you know, on a horse with a 30-pound sword and a lance, you know, and learned how to fight from a school in Prague that had been teaching knights going back to the 15th century on how to, and actually used it and almost killed myself in the process because those things are heavy, man. And anyway, so, you know, as an actor, I have gotten the opportunity to explore the human condition and also many cultures. So I'm not locked within one narrow, you know, as Hamlet said, I could lock myself within a nutshell and call myself king of infinite space. And then he adds, were it not that I have bad dreams. The problem is we lock ourselves within the nutshells of our own perception. The actor's responsibility and duty and obligation, because he has one, is to open the eyes of the audience in the same way, and the mind of the audience and the hearts of the audience and the guts of the audience to other ways of being. And as Aristotle said, thereby bring about compassion and tolerance towards your fellow man. And the elimination, the purgation of terror, i.e., take all the fear out and throw it into space. And in that particular process of creating compassion, elimination of terror, then you have what is called, quote, entertainment. That is to say, you're elevated, your spirit is elevated. You walk out feeling better, you know? Mm-hmm. And you go to a show like The Producers, or, you know, these great shows that, you know, have come out of the American womb, because America's produced some of the most extraordinary artists in the last 100 years. But you walk out of those, you walk out of a Marx Brother movie, my God, you know, so fabulous. The Three Stooges, you know, Mel Brooks, love the Three Stooges, yeah. You know, the Mel Brooks, you know, The Producers, you know, and you know, you could be in a terrible state of mind and see one of these artists, and they liberate you. They give you hope. Well, that's part of the purpose, right? That's the whole idea, right?
Well, it is. But
America's has done a great job at that, man. A great job. Listen, I'm sorry. I know McDonald's is really bad for you, but it tastes great.
Yeah.
And at one time, it really was good for you. And I'll tell you something. Coca-Cola once saved my life when I was in Moscow shooting a film.
Yeah.
Because I was diabetic, and the reason it saved my life is because I've been put on these drugs that almost killed me with the diabetes, and my blood sugar dropped, and I was passing out. And thank God, a friend of mine gave me a bottle of Coke, which is filled with sugar, and brought my blood sugar back. But the problem is, the very thing that saves you will also destroy you. Because what is the nature of the sugar in that? It's fructose. And
Right.
fructose will create diabetes. Diabetes is now 1 in 2 in the American population. 1 in 2 people will get diabetes during their lifetime. Cancer, 1 in 3. Autism, which used to be 1 in 2,000 and
Yeah.
something, is now 1 in 7.
Yeah.
Something is wrong.
Absolutely.
You want to make America great again. Yes, absolutely. But you must fix the health of the nation.
Well,
American is now number 48, 52 on the World Health Index.
I was watching an interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr. again the other day, and they said so many things. Yeah, so many things that's impressive. But he's the only one that talks about this issue.
He's the only one. He's the only one that's really aware of the fact that you cannot make a nation great unless the health of the nation is strong. And America had at one time the greatest health. Why? Because it had the greatest food. American beef was the best. American grain was the best.
Sure, and
everything American was the best.
Right, and he mentions like when I was a kid. I'm a little younger than you, but when I was a kid, nobody. I mean, everybody ate peanut butter, and there was no such thing as peanut allergies. Now you go to there's a big peanut on every table in the school cafeteria.
Of course, an excellent source of protein, an excellent source of fat. The problem is pesticides, herbicides, Roundup, endless amounts of what the French call conneries, mischievous tampering with, such as let's use radiation to keep meat, on your shelf for 10 years. Let's find a way of increasing the profit. And the only way you're going to do that is by deadening things. So this stuff, hey, it's great. Yeah, well, we've got tons of stuff, but the trouble is if you eat it, first of all, nutritionally, they've done experiments where a carrot eaten today from 50 years ago, 40 years ago, can have as much as 1,000% difference in mineral and vitamin content. That means you would have to eat 1,000 of these carrots at $2 or whatever they cost now, which is absurd in America, that vegetables are so expensive. But you would have to eat 1,000 of those to get what you used to get from 1 carrot or 1 egg.
Yeah.
So the strength of America, right? Make America great again. Well, make them strong. Not just a few rarefied individuals who are super athletes because they have access to every single food and every single supplement and all that kind of stuff. But the population of America, the middle class, the working people, make them strong from the ground up. And here, as I said, is again the viper, the serpent, has been drugs and alcohol, and not just drugs, i.e. street drugs, but prescription drugs. America consumes more prescription drugs than any place on earth. America represents, less than 6% of the population of the world, consumes 80% of the world's painkillers, to say nothing of the antidepressives, the antipsychotics, the anti-anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. This is insane, kids. How can you possibly live this? So it really is becoming Hunger Games. It really is becoming Metropolis, where people, in a sense, are becoming hybrid robots. The zombies that have been on television now for years, because television is predictive, art is predictive, right? Yeah. Artists are the antennae of society. They tell you what's going to happen. Well, this is happening. People are being zombified for real. And
Karen Carpenter had the same question I had. She said she was wondering the same thing. Who is awake in the film industry? So she's looking for somebody else like you.
Well, let's put it this way. If you are awake, you'll be put to sleep. If you continue to stay awake, you will be ostracized. If you continue to stay awake, you will be exiled. And if you continue to stay awake, you will be killed, because that is the process. That is the natural movement of things. Socrates, who is one of my heroes, I did a play on Socrates. I actually wrote a play called The Death of Socrates and Other Monologues, right? Now, Socrates, for the people out there who don't know who he was really the founder of, in many ways, Western civilization as we know it. At the feet of Socrates, a bricklayer, a guy simple stonemason, is laid really the entire foundation of the ideals of democracy, freedom of thought, freedom of inquiry, the ability to equals among equals within a society that America has been striving to create from its inception. And Socrates was the guy that really kind of started this dance, and it's an extraordinary story because for those who don't know how Socrates became Socrates, was that what happened in Greece at that period of time, and Athens had been taken over by a military junta, very much like, communism had taken over it and so forth. And it was finally thrown out, and democracy was restored. One of the guys that was escaped, the junta returned, and he was a mischievous Greek. And he decided, and this is true, this is not made up stuff, this actually happened. He, on a kind of just a whim, decided to go to the oracle at Delphi. Now, the oracle at Delphi at that time was a cross between the Rand Corporation and the Vatican. It was a very holy, sacred place, and very serious. When the Greeks wanted to find out whether they should go to war or not with Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and so forth, before they would commit an action like that, they would go to the oracle and they would ask the oracle. And the oracle was a Pythian priestess, these women that would go into trances, and the god Apollo would speak through them. And these priests would take down notes and stuff and say, well, what did he say? But the thing is, so in fact, there's a famous story about the Athenians going and saying, should we go to war against Corinth? And, the goddess thing, and out of her mouth came, a war will be won. And they thought, we're going to win. No, what she said was a war would be won. Didn't say it was going to be you. And but you could go there, and it was serious. It was very serious. You could go there and you could say, listen, I got a headache. What should I do about it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
And sorry, I didn't. And I'm sorry, I'm rattling, I know. But anyway. And
well, there's another question that somebody has for you. This White Wolf says, have you ever encountered the pedophile culture in Hollywood?
No. Okay. I never did, but I did meet what's his name, Corey Feldman.
Yeah, Feldman.
Yeah, and he was friends with a friend of mine who did tell me that apparently they had been abused, or that the abuse was going on. I only really found out, I never had direct contact with any of that stuff at all. But then you see, I was not in the upper echelons. I was a working actor, upper middle class.
And you didn't come as a kid. I mean, most of these people like Corey Feldman, they're talking about it from experience. They experienced it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But there is no doubt in my mind that certainly that is going on, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. No question about it. Worldwide phenomenon. And here in Europe and France, Belgium, and so forth, and England, this is a serious, serious problem. And as are, in fact, the satanic cults that do operate, and they are real. And that has been around, by the way, since the time of Carthage. Yeah. The Carthaginians, the ancient Carthaginians, sacrificed, quote, virgins, i.e. young children, on the altar to the god Moloch and so forth. And this kind of shit's been going on for a long time. It's gone deep underground now, because it used to be out in the open.
Yeah, the Hellfire Club with Ben Franklin.
Well, possibly, yes. But I just want to finish the story of Socrates, because I have to tell the story. So anyway, what happened was, he goes to the oracle and says, hey, who's the wisest man in all of Greece, buddy? And the oracle said, Socrates, the stonemason. He's like, well, what the hell's going on here? He knows Socrates. He goes to him, who's, mid-hammering, and says, you're not going to believe this, but the oracle just told me you're the wisest man in all of Greece. And Socrates was shocked and said, are you kidding? He says, I don't know anything. Is God lying? Is the oracle lying? So he says, as in the Apologia, he says, I decided to prove the oracle was wrong. So I went around and started asking questions. I went to the wisest man in Athens. And he says to the audience, because he was actually on trial for his life, which is what the Apologia, for having done what he did. And he says to the audience, you all know who he is. It was probably Pericles. Went to the Agora, who would have been the equivalent of a cross between, the president of the United States and, uh, a professor, whatever. And he said, I went and I listened to him, and after a while, after listening to him, I realized that other people thought he was very wise, and he himself even wiser. In truth, he wasn't. So I walked away shaking my head, thinking to myself, I dare say none of us knows much of anything, but he thinks he knows. And I neither know nor think that I know. That was the beginning of Socratic inquiry. He then dedicated his life traveling around asking people what they did and how they did it. And that became the foundation. And then of democracy, of free thinking, of scientific thought, of all that. And he got followed around by these students, one of whom was Plato, who recorded it all, until finally Socrates was brought up on charges for heresy against the goddess Athena and the corruption of the youth. Serious charges punishable by death. In front of 500 Athenians, he defended himself. It's called the Apologia. And he was declared guilty. At that point, he had three choices. He could go into exile, he could pay a fine, or he could accept death. He rejected exile. He said, if you, Athens, the most enlightened people in Europe, refuse to listen to me, who else would? He says, as far as money goes, I don't have 2 cents, because he had dedicated himself only to inquiry and to the pursuit of understanding the human condition. Now, his students gathered the equivalent of $250,000. I think the fine was maybe $100,000. More than enough to pay the fine. The Athenians rejected it. They were so pissed off with this man, and he accepted death. And his response to that was, he said, so you've declared that I should die, so be it. He said, Athens gave me life. Athens has now declared to give me death, so be it. He said, and furthermore, I have no idea what death is. Perhaps it's the most wonderful thing that could ever happen to me. He said, I have no fear of death, but I have a fear of doing wrong. We now live in a time where people have nothing but a fear of death, but have no qualm about doing wrong. Now, that is the foundation of so-called Western philosophy, and the foundation of what then became and went into the Constitution, where it's stated, people hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In that liberty is freedom of speech, freedom of thought, the ability to inquire, to ask, to be able to say to someone, oh, well, now you tell me that this particular, I should take this particular substance and put it into my body. And you can tell me that this particular substance that you asked me to put into my body is perfectly fine. Can you tell me exactly what the nature of this substance is and how it operates? Oh, I see. And so you're telling me there are biological weapons of mass destruction in this particular country, and you have absolute proof of that. I see. Can I see the proof? Can we examine the proof? What is the nature of this? But none of this inquiry, this obvious questioning, exists anymore. Now, getting back to Hollywood. In Hollywood, we create movies. And what do movies do? Well, they entertain us. They take us to other worlds. They inform us. They make us feel and experience things that we would not normally feel or experience. That is its purpose. But it can be also used to hypnotize people. It can also be used to brainwash people. And it can also be used, and has been used, to set up a particular mode of thinking, exactly tailored to, shall we say, certain vested interests, period. Vested interests, i.e., profit. And it's all about the profit. Now, if it's only going to be about the profit, well, you know what? You're going to have problems. There was a Chinese emperor, a very wise man, which is why they practice Tai Chi in China and do physical exercise in the morning, which everybody should be doing. for the health of the body and the mind, mens, sans mens in corporis est, or whatever it was in Latin. But this particular emperor was a very wise man. So he passed a law that every doctor in China would have to be paid a few cents a day. But the moment you got sick, you stopped paying them.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's a great idea. Yeah.
You take the profit motive out of it. Because if you don't, then there's no money in health. There's only money in sickness. There's no money in sanity. There's only money in insanity. There's no money in peace. There is money in war in the pockets of few individuals. So is it for the common good? No. So those Greeks, and then we'll go back to Hollywood, had two central questions, which are questions that are absolutely relevant to our time. What is the nature of the good? In other words, what is ethical? What is correct behavior? Mm-hmm. And what is the nature of the real? What is the nature of the real? Is this real? Is this really happening? So, I don't want to go into recent history all that much, because we know exactly what happened. If for him that hath ears and eyes to see, and we know what happened. We know what's going on. But if I'm drugged out, I can't think. If I'm drinking myself into oblivion, I can't. How can I exist? So if you look at consumption of alcohol and drugs, and like this fentanyl, horror, and all the stuff that's been going on, this has to be addressed. And I think Robert Kennedy Jr. is right on the button, and the only one that I've seen who's awake.
Oh, he's late. If you saw it, of all people, he had a great interview with Howie Mandel and his daughter recently.
I saw that interview. It was a great interview.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he
handled it. And I know Howie, and I thought, Howie, you're such an asshole.
Yeah, he's just being
it's like you're such an asshole, Howie. Go man. Keep doing it. Let's see, and he defended himself brilliantly. Without putting him down, without offending him or offending his daughter or anything like that.
So he has such knowledge, and he is the kind of guy. Again, he's not perfect. I get, because the problem is
nobody's perfect. I mean,
in my world, if I say something good about Tucker Carlson or Elon Musk or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they don't trust anybody. So they don't think anybody's legitimate. They're all, and okay, it could be true, but RFK Jr., all I'm saying is and yes, I'm aware of his stance on Israel. I don't understand that. Obviously somebody told him to say, but I don't like it. But everything else he says is so far head and shoulders above the other candidates. He's so much more qualified. He's brilliant. He knows all the stats and the figures, and he's talking about things about the chronic illnesses in children and adults that are important. America's not only, dumbed down, but they're physically sick. I mean, it's much easier to control.
Children are having heart attacks now, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
Children are having heart attacks. It's just uncanny. Cancer rates are skyrocketing, and that is a fact. Heart attacks are skyrocketing. Everything is going exponential. America spends more money on drugs than any other country in the world, and has the worst health on the planet. It is now, I think, number 48 on the health index.
Yeah.
48 or 52, actually. Canada used to be 12. It's now number 28, 20, 30, something like that. Yeah. And all you have to do is open your eyes and look at the facts. Look at the information. Follow the science. But follow the science means actually open your eyes. In order for something to be scientific, if you're going to follow it, it has to have validity, reliability, and repeatability. And it has to be valid. You have to know how it works. They don't know how, it's like, oh, take this, take that. Oh, really? Show me. Show me the money. Show me exactly how this works. Because you're going to put something into my body that I have no idea what it's going to do, nor do you. Mm-hmm. Nor do you. You have no idea. And you say, well, listen, doctor, I got a headache. Well, take this drug. Fine. Okay. Don't just give him the drug. Find out what's giving him the headache. What is the cause of it? What is the nature of it? That's what naturopathic doctors, that's what healers have done for centuries. That all went out the window in the last 50, 60 years. All of a sudden, the doctors are no longer doctors. They're drug technicians.
Yep.
And it's, and now AI is coming in. Excuse me. All right. Okay, let's go for it, man. Let's do Hunger Games. I'm ready for Metropolis. I'm ready. Put on my robot suit. Yeah, alter my DNA, and I'm
Yeah.
ready to go, man. Let's go out to the next level. It's interesting because without being, because it is quite difficult. Is that one of the people that I did follow for many years, because I followed and I studied different people, was Rudolf Steiner, who was the founder of Theosophy, of anthroposophy. Anthroposophy was a philosophical movement, but it was more than a philosophical movement. It also had impacts and implications in farming and education. Many schools were founded. Medicine, definitely medicine, and he said basically he was a mystic of sorts, like kind of up there with the American sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce kind of reality. And Steiner said that there had been these incarnations throughout history as we evolve. The devil apparently had incarnated in human form 5,000 years ago in China. And Christ was then incarnated, the teacher, the one. And in our generation, this demon by the name of Ahriman, who was an ancient Persian demon, and he was the demon of technology and science. And he would be incarnated in our time, and that we would have to confront him. We would actually have to confront this. In other words, we have to open our eyes, we have to look into it, and we have to face it. And we have to pray for the courage to be able to face it, because it's going to take courage. So, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Well, you're so well read. You're so well read. You know all these things. You must be familiar. One of the guys I was fascinated by as a young man was Wilhelm Reich. What do you think of him?
Oh yeah, he was terrific. Absolutely terrific. I studied him.
Orgone accumulator.
The orgone accumulator, for which, of course, he was thrown into jail and died in jail. And he predicted. Reich actually was an extraordinary individual, because he, being a student of Freud, and he was a brilliant scientist.
Yes, he was.
Analyzing the dreams of his patients in Germany in the 1920s, he deduced that something powerfully terrible was going to happen in Germany. This is where the Nazis were just starting up. And based upon the examination of these dreams, he said, I better get out of here. And he split and he went to the United States. He predicted that he would end up his days in jail, and which he did. And he wrote a brilliant piece that I wanted to adapt into a theater production, as I did with the Apologia. I actually I adapted the Apologia of Socrates. I put it on in a theater in Toronto, the Artwood Theater, for 3 weeks, where I played Socrates as an old hippie and did that speech. I redid it into modern speech. But in Listen, Little Man by Wilhelm Reich, he confronts Ahriman. He confronts all this stuff and looks it in the eye and says, hey, buddy, I know what you're doing.
Yeah. The mass psychology of fascism. Yeah.
I see what you're doing. Well, okay, let's talk about fascism. Okay. And you say, well, we're not fascist. Oh, yeah, really? No kidding. I wrote a play because I'm also a playwright, and 2 of my plays are being done right now, actually, here in Europe. I wrote a play called Hotel Praha about the fall of communism. And in the play, the character that I played, who was this kind of crazy guy in a hotel room, and it's all a monologue and all that, predicts basically, that in the fall of communism, basically that it would fly across the ocean and land on American soil. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing basically that the corpo-fascist technocracy that has taken over this planet has become the new Nazis, the true Nazis, which are complete control freaks. And the issue is control. And that's what, unfortunately, I think AI is really going to
let's talk about AI, because you come from an industry where I mean, how many movies have we seen where artificial robots or or the
Well,
computers are
listen,
going around?
years ago, I was shooting a movie of the week. I was up in Sacramento. In fact, I was working I was doing this, The Simpsons. What was her name? The actress that did The Simpsons.
The
Anyway, with her,
yeah, yeah,
I was working with her, and anyway, we're shooting a thing. And there was an actor there who was playing a small part, and he was a teacher. He was he taught acting, and we were talking about acting and all that stuff. And he was actually hired by the George Lucas company because he was working with all these computer guys who were starting to build a hybrid movie star, using, and that's where we've gone. We can now make movie stars, robotically, and that's really what's going on. Any voice, they can take the voice. You take a sample of your voice, and they can make you say anything, and then taking faces and all that. So the entire industry basically now is all moving towards that direction, where living, breathing human actors may no longer be of any need of any kind, and it's so bizarre because it's like a supernova. We've gone into the profession of the actor. Okay, I mean, it's been around since the beginning of time, right? And they've always been around. It's always been a very small group, and but in the last 60 years, more actors exist now than in the entire combined history of the world. Everybody's an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, Marshall McLuhan, a great and brilliant thinker, and so forth, who wrote Understanding Media, who predicted the cyber age, who predicted
the medium is the message. Yeah, sure.
The medium is all that. In his first book, The Mechanical Bride, said that the launching of Telstar, the very first satellite, had converted the planet Earth into a proscenium arch, thereby turning everybody into the planet into actors. Well, guess what? We all are. We've all got our iPhones and our Androids, and we're all filming ourselves on vacation. We're filming our food, and we're doing our podcasts, and everybody is now performing. In front of the Eiffel Tower, they're all standing, they're posing, and in front of their cameras are all out. They're filming their food and all that. And it's going on the internet, the entire worldwide thing. We're all actors now. So excuse me, so the actor is now been given the job not of pretending to be other people, as was written as a wonderful miniseries I saw recently, Succession, where the lead character, played by Brian Cox, says has gone to the theater, and he said, "How was the play?" And he says, "People pretending to be people," or it's no longer that. The actor actually has got to now pretend to be human.
Well, I think reality TV changed that. But Chris Graves says he has a question for you. Does Nick have any advice for younger actors like myself who are trying to break in the industry as character actors?
Yes, run. That's
run away.
And no, I'm serious. I'm deadly serious. Gurdjieff, who was one of the fellows that influenced me when I was young, Ouspensky and those guys, the mystics and all that, said the following about acting. He said, if you're an actor, quit, stop immediately. All your intensity will gain you nothing. However, the highest aspiration of mankind, capital M, is to act with an A. Now, what the hell does that mean? It means this. Only if you absolutely have to do it, do you do it. It's a vocation. It's not a profession. It's a calling. It's not a profession. It's a calling. It always has been. Mm-hmm. Calling, vocation, voice. You're called to it. And most people today go into it because they want glamour and fame. And glamour and fame, as the spirit of my father said to a friend of mine, is a joke. Because money and fame will never make you happy. It'll bring nothing but misery. And if you're going to do it, then study martial arts, which I did. In other words, defend yourself. Train the body, the mind, the voice, everything, and know that you're going to be knocked down so many times you're not going to be able to stand it and just wait to get up again.
Don't you think it's a desire for recognition too? Because I know as a writer,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
We live, we want to be, what do people think of it? We're looking for recognition. And it's the same thing
Well,
with
of
actors.
course.
What did you think?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Of course, we all want to be recognized per se as human beings, but the issue of the imbalance, the inflammation of fame nowadays in American society, where people are not people unless they are quote famous and rich. That's bullshit. And what I'm saying is maintain your integrity. That's the issue. If you can maintain your integrity and do it, yeah, do it. But know there's going to be a lot of hard work, and that's all it is. And like Orpheus, rarely are you going to get, quote, satisfaction, because in the story of Orpheus, and, I always go to the Greeks because, of course, that's my culture. Where I come from was Magna Graecia, the ancient Greeks, and I was very influenced by that. But in the story of Orpheus, there's a story. Orpheus brings art. He brings music. He brings, all this stuff, theater and all, to mankind, right? And he's married to Persephone, and Persephone is kidnapped by the god of death. And Orpheus goes crazy, and he goes to his father Zeus and says, "I want to see my wife. I want my wife back. And talk to your brother, Mr. Death." And let me talk to him. So he goes down and he talks to Death and says, "I want my wife back." And Death says to him, "Oh, she's just down the hallway there. Why don't you go over there, play your music, your guitar, your banjo, your whatever, and turn around and just start walking. And if she follows you, you can lead her right out of here, but you're not allowed to turn around and look at her." So he starts playing, and he's just freaking out. Is she coming? Is she coming? Is she? Turns around, there she is. Boom, she disappears. Now, what is the meaning of that? It means that the artist, you're not going to get a crack at it. It's like what Brando said. There's no actors left, only businessmen. And the real actor, i.e., if you're going to be a real actor, like an Orson Welles, the genuine item, like a Sam Peckinpah. These guys were real guys. You know what I mean? The guys that really were in the thick of it. Then you better get ready for war. Now, if you just want to sort of like, okay, you go ahead and go for it, man. But you're called to it. If you're called to it, do it. That's the only advice I have. If you're called to it, do it. And if you can do anything else, do anything else. But if you can't do anything else, do that. If you've got the spirit inside of you, the fire, and that fire is real, and it's been passed on from generation to generation, exactly like the Olympic torch. It's passed on, and it was passed on to me by Rod Steiger when I saw him when I was 10 years old, and I saw him do The Pawnbroker, Paddy Chayefsky, and it blew me away. I was 10 years old, and I went, "What the hell did I just watch?"
Did you ever get to meet him when you get to Hollywood?
I did, actually. Near the end of his life, I hung out with him for about a week. On a film festival in the Caribbean, and I said, "My God, you're the man who made me an actor because you passed something on to me." So if this man asking this question feels that inside of his soul, his spirit, then do it, man. Do it. Absolutely go for it. You'll never get a better ride. You'll never get a better ride.
The entertainment is such a weird, and I alluded to this in Unborrowed Fame, the book I wrote about it, but so many people
wrote about it brilliantly. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it was wonderful talking to people like you, but it's, fame has such a short, shelf life that it's incredible. And so it's ironic that Andy Warhol, who epitomizes kind of being famous for no reason at this point, but the only thing he's remembered.
You're absolutely right about Warhol. He was quite a brilliant soul, but he basically understood that basically everything had become, you might say, synthesized. Everything had become synthetic. It's like if you pick a rose, the rose is a beautiful flower. There are many qualities to it. Besides the thorn, its color, now there's this perfume. And all that, it's all one thing. But what happens is you're going to take that perfume and you're going to synthesize it. Now you got rose spray, right? Now you're spraying the perfume and that's it. But you don't have the rose anymore. In effect, what's happened is we've been, as Marx said, alienated, right? The worker is alienated from his product. But the reality is the consumer is totally alienated from himself.
Yeah. Well, but he talked about everyone being famous for 15 minutes. And ironically, that's what we remember him for. But it's so true. And my book showed that so many of these people who were briefly there. I mean, people that I talked to, like my friend Susan Olsen, who played Cindy Brady in the Brady Bunch, and we become buddies, and she's kind of in my world. But well, everybody loves the Brady Bunch and shit, but they don't really necessarily remember who are those kids that so she was briefly on a big show. Lots of people like that. It's got it, especially if you're a child actor.
Well, listen, 'twas always thus. 'Twas always thus. I mean, Shakespeare, in his famous "Life's but a walking shadow," a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Everything in life is transient. It isn't just fame. It's the whole nature of existence. This is a transient experience we're all having. We're spiritual beings having an earthly experience. We're just passing through this dimension, but it's a very important dimension, So it's like what the Buddha said about it. He said, that the opportunity that we get, he says, the tortoise of infinity swims the oceans of eternity. For eternities upon eternities, decides to go to the top, and of the ocean, and as his head pokes through the water, a wreath of flowers is going by. His head pokes right through it. He says that's what the odds are of being incarnated on this plane. The earth is an extraordinary experience. And the actor acts because he wants to manifest the joy, what Stanislavski referred to, the gladness. The painter paints to illustrate and show what the eyes can do, and the musician creates music in order to manifest. And the actor in many ways has to be a combination of all those variables and bring them all about. I mean, I don't know what to say about it other than the fact that it's worth doing. It's worth taking a crack at it.
As an actor, how do you? I mean, I don't know. You have some people, especially if you're like a Jim Carrey type, let's say, who plays so many credits. He is, but I would imagine people like that have a hard time figuring out what exactly is my personality. Who am I? Outside of all these roles, do you get wrapped up? Like, I mean, you did the role of the voice of the slasher in Black Christmas, something like that. But I wonder, like a Freddy Krueger type, people like that play those roles. How do you? I mean, does any of that spill over into your real life? Do you suddenly start thinking like the character or something?
Actors act.
Yeah.
It's what Sir Laurence Olivier said to Dustin Hoffman. When Hoffman had stayed up all night running for Marathon Man to wipe himself up, make him exhausted because he's going to be tortured by Olivier. Is it safe? Is it safe? And he's all fucked up. And Olivier said, "Why don't you do what I do, dear boy? Act."
Yes.
No, you're acting. You're acting. But I say the only difference between me and a schizophrenic is I'm not schizophrenic. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline and hard work. That's all it is. It's just discipline and hard work and a modicum of talent. You've got to have that talent, but everybody can act. In fact, I'm writing a book on acting called "Acting is for Everyone." I'm hoping to finish it this year. And basically anyone and everyone does act. The greatest actors are children, of course. I learned more from children and animals. They do it spontaneously and naturally. Without, yeah, of course. Yep. It's no big deal. It's not like, it's like as they used to say, it's not rocket science. No, of course not. It's not rocket science. It's an impulse, and it's a natural impulse that I think all mammals and maybe all living creatures have. It has something to it is, as Brando pointed out, a survival mechanism. When he was being interviewed by Connie Chung or whatever, he said, "Well, what do you mean I'm the greatest actor?" He said, "What are you talking about? Everybody acts." Mm-hmm. He says, they do all the acting. The guy has to sell something or another, and he's acting, and so forth. I'm just, I'm not, and all that stuff. It is true. Everyone does act. It's just that the actor, for some reason, like a musician, or has you might say, an inclination towards it, a calling towards it for some reason. I have friends that are really brilliant, musicians, rock stars, and stuff like that. And I'd say, well, how did you start? I just started doing it. It's like, yeah, some of them studied, but John Lennon never studied. Paul McCartney never studied. The Rolling Stones never studied. Jim Morrison, studied film. Bob Dylan, for crying out loud, just went around imitating Woody Guthrie, and you're born to it, right? So it's a calling, and the problem, Donald, the problem with it is the fact that in our society, it has been so over-exaggerated by, quote, mercantile interests, so completely, and because of the nature of the business itself, is able to generate a tremendous amount of money, and has in the past a tremendous amount of money. If you think about the amount of money that, entertainment has produced, and particularly now with the internet, fully 50% of all the billionaire/trillionaires are media moguls. It's all about, it's gotten totally out of control, out of whack. So, you're somebody, you're just somebody, and you're walking around going, what am I going to do with my life, man? If I become a lawyer, I'm going to end up, doing these really stupid cases for the rest of my life, or a dentist. I don't want to spend my life looking down people's,
Right.
Or, what I'm saying? I mean, think about the profession as opposed to...
How about being a proctologist? Talking about a career.
What a grand idea. If we had harmony, and I was saying, this is really turning into a lecture, but if we had harmony, right, for example, we would be, all of us really would be farmers, living with nature, watching the trees and the fruit and the thing, and raising children and the animals and all that stuff, and living fully in 360. We no longer live in 360. We went from 360 to 180 to 90 to 30 to 20 to 10, and now to what? 3% of an arc? 1% of an arc? We specialize in life. You can't specialize in life. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a doctor. Oh, okay. Well, doctor, how does it feel to be a doctor? I don't know. What does it feel like to be an engineer? Oh, I don't know. What does it feel like to be, I don't know what? What are you? You define yourself according to your profession? That's nonsense. It's like, I played Phidias, the fisherman, and whatever. It says Socrates to the actor. No, so what do you do to the actor? And he goes, oh, I'm an actor. I act. I said, oh, what do you do? He said, I emote. I express the human condition. And he said, well, I recently won Best Actor at the theater in Thebes. So really, congratulations.
Well, I just want to tell you, I got a comment from Stephanie Green. She says, I'm going to be inappropriate. I'm in love with this guy. Sam's Bodhi's Tree said, did you ever know Cliff Osmond? He was his acting teacher, and he worked with Raul Julia and Armand Assante.
No, but I did know Armand, and I did meet Raul Julia once. But no, I didn't. Who was he? Was he in New York? One of the New York guys? See, I didn't go through New York. I didn't go through New York, so I missed all that. Unfortunately, I wish I had.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This guy Sam was. He was in some plays in Vietnam or something. He's done some kind of acting. He's in the chat room all the time. I had no idea. You learn about people here.
Oh yeah. No, I was brought into the Actors Studio by Martin Landau after I did Ticket to Heaven, and I was nominated and all that. Frou-frou was going around in Hollywood. I was going to be the next big whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Martin Landau wanted me to play James Dean, of all people, because he had been friends with James Dean, and he said, you could do it, and he said, but I want you to come to the Actors Studio for a year. So, because I shied away from all that stuff. So I went to the Actors Studio for about a year, and it's okay. It's fine. It's like, I'll spend an hour and a half pretending to drink a glass of water. Okay, let's do that for an hour. I don't think you have to practice at life, but anyway, no. But I did, encounter some, I'm trying to think. I mean, when it comes to acting itself, it's in the doing. That's all. Acting is doing. Period. You want to learn how to act? Get on stage. You want to learn how to act? Start doing it. That's it. Do it. It's like the Nike commercial. Just do it. But I did study all of these guys, and it's a very interesting profession, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, we're all fascinated by it, obviously. That's why,
Well,
people.
that's it, exactly. And then one examines that issue. What is it about the fact that someone pretending to be someone else fascinates the mammal?
Yeah.
What is it about that? And then I thought to myself, well, animals, for example, if you go into the woods and you stare at an animal, and it stares back at you for a long period of time, you or the animal is in danger. Because the only time animals actually stare at you is when they're going to eat you. You know what I mean? Or so. But here we go into theaters and sit and stare at a small little box, with fixed intensity. The person being stared at, right, is confronting the stare. So the organicus is like, holy shit, I'm being looked at. Oh my God. I mean, that's the way I felt. It was like, I hated it.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. I mean, so-called stage fright is absolutely extant. I mean, I worked with Maggie Smith years ago. It was just a brilliant actress, and we did Antony and Cleopatra at Stratford, and and she would vomit before each performance because her nerves were so activated.
Yeah.
All real actors, I think, experience that, but they learn to cover it up, or they use the energy of the anxiety that is provoked. It's not a natural way to behave, really. I mean, the church in some ways was right to ban actors, and to say, you know what, you're not going to do that, not here. It's not good for you, and it's not good for anybody else. But the reality is, it is good. It does serve a purpose. But the problem, as I say, is it's been co-opted. That purpose has been co-opted and corroded quite seriously by vested interests, so that it's no longer, in the Chinese theater, you are dedicating your performance to the ancestors and to the gods. That's your way. You're not working for General Motors or General Electric or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But that's what we've become. So
well, Chris Graves.
Yeah.
Chris Graves. Chris Graves is in the chat room. He's one of he and Peter Seacosh, who I saw earlier as well. They are my primary researchers. They help me out so much now. It's amazing how much they make
wonderful
my job a
work.
lot easier ready. But it says, Chris says, will Nick ever consider doing the narration for any future Don Jeffries, Peter Seacosh, Chris Graves books? And I was thinking, your voice is incredible.
Absolutely. I'm looking for work, man. I'm an unemployed actor.
All right, well, I'm gonna have my publisher of Masking the Truth, because so many people have said about an audio book of that. But I'll have to get with him and see if it's feasible.
That would be great. I've narrated books. I've done that. I love doing it because you can get to play different voices and stuff like that. And that would be fun. Sure, absolutely.
Well, I'd be honored, but because you can tell when you're talking, you instantly kind of go into dialects. You did Thomas Edison. It sounded convincing to me. I don't know what the hell Thomas Edison sounded like, but it sounded like him to me.
I don't either.
You kind of adopted what you think in your head of like a industrial age American voice, Yeah,
you just kind of look at his face and you kind of get an idea, I mean, guys like Jim Carrey do it so brilliantly, and then they can actually manipulate their face into extraordinary contortions. I met Jim when he first arrived in Hollywood at the Comedy Club, and just he's a wonderful, wonderful spirit. And he did one of the great performances when he played this other genius, Andy Kaufman, Man in the Moon. What a performance, man. And of course, the great and only Robin Williams, who suffered such a horrible death, after having been such an extraordinary being. But he relapsed after 20 years, as did, another great actor who played Truman Capote was his name. He died as well from the drugs and the alcohol.
Robin Williams was an incredible. I mean, people think of him as a comedian. I loved his dramatic roles, and I think
he was a brilliant incredible. I met him because he studied yoga from the same fellow I studied yoga while he was doing Mork and Mindy. And
he was a sad figure. He just had there was something really melancholy about him.
Within every great comedian is a terrifying tragedian. And within every great tragedian is a comic. That's the way it works. It's yin and yang. It's opposites. So the greater the comedic talent, the deeper whatever it is that they have. I mean, one of the most serious men I ever met in my life, besides my professor of existentialism and phenomenology in university, was Woody Allen. When I met Woody Allen, I met this unbelievably serious man. I went, "Oh wow, Woody Allen!" I was going to laugh. Woody Allen, And I met my professor of phenomenology. Good evening. Oh, good evening.
Yeah.
So nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you as well.
Well, they say Steve Martin in his private life is very unfunny. Like he doesn't want to ever be funny. He's,
No,
do you know him, or it's what I've heard?
I saw him in a drugstore with Jonathan Winters. I used to go to this drugstore.
What a combination! Wow, meeting Steve Martin
and Montecito. There used to be this little restaurant, and where I lived in Montecito for a number of years, and it was like a little kind of little drugstore restaurant. And there was Steve Martin looking at a menu, and Jonathan Winters was there, who lived up there. He was one of the funniest men on earth. He inspired Robin Williams. And suddenly Jonathan Winters starts pointing to Steve Martin, going, Steve Martin, Steve Martin. And Steve Martin is like hiding under his menu. But Jonathan Winters would lose his marbles every now and then and go in direct traffic. And stuff like that. They put him in the nut. That kind of genius, is really difficult to. Oh, I don't know.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is a guy you were thinking of to play Capote. So the chat room was now, yeah.
A great actor. I'm just saying, it's a tricky road, my friend. As it's a little bit like climbing a mountain. The higher up the mountain you go, the trickier and the slippier it gets. And more rarefied the atmosphere. Very few ever really stay up there. And as Sue Mengers, who used to be my agent many, many years ago, used to say, it's not getting to the top, it's staying at the top. Of course you can't stay on the top. It's a cycle, and life's but a walking shadow. So the point is, I think the issue really essential is, and I think American movies have been fantastic at doing this, more than almost any other art form America has created, which is the ability to make human beings feel that they are human beings.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I still love that, my only regret, really, if I have any regrets, and, I've had a very rich life, is that I've never been in a movie that, has won an Oscar and made money. And none of my pictures ever made any money. And I never, won an Oscar, and, just to experience it, just to experience that moment. Because I'm a sap. I actually get moved by this stuff.
Well, that's got to be one of the fantasies for you as an actor, is giving an acceptance speech. And
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I won the Canadian Oscar. That was interesting, and but just to kind of like, because I basically been doing all these little films and stuff like that, but really not in where people. There's something that kind of like works, for the general population, because it's a marvelous, marvelous feeling to be able to say, I have actually touched the lives, hearts, and minds of other human beings and have that connection. That part is the good part. That is the perfume of the rose, the real one, not the synthetic stuff. You know what I'm saying? And not all that phony, sentimental bullshit either. You know what I mean? And certainly not any of the glamour, Paris Hilton, all this, you know what I'm saying? I mean, all that, fame and, and over here, I hate all that stuff.
Did you know Sally Kirkland? She's been on my show before.
I love Sally. I love Sally.
She's great. Sally. She's kind of a little bit. She has a few toes in my world. I mean, she's open to it, but she's
a very old friend of mine, and actually Sally, I've known when I first arrived in Hollywood in '76. We became friends, and she used to study yoga. I used to study yoga and stayed friends. And then years later, I was producing a film
called Last Gamble, which unfortunately never got a release. With Steve Bauer starred in it, and I was in it, and Sally. I brought Sally in to play the mother, and she was absolutely brilliant. And of course, she was also a member of the Actors Studio, and she was a great actress, truly a great actress.
Oh yeah, she talked about.
Wonderful.
She was, I think she was really good friends with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. I think they were both in her acting class at the Actors Studio, I think.
Yeah, she knew everybody. Sally actually knew everybody. Sally was
I
like
hope to get her back on. She's had some health issues lately, and
I
the
know, I
phone number I
know.
had for her is disconnected. So I've been trying to contact her because she's fascinating to me. And she also, the reason she's more receptive to the kind of stuff I talk about was because she was one of those who was vax injured. She had a very bad reaction to the COVID vax, and so
A
that's
lot of
changed her
people,
perspective.
a lot of people did. A lot of people still do. That's a reality.
Yeah.
That is a fact. That's just a fact. Just look it up. You'll see. I mean, cancer rates are going through the roof. Heart diseases. It's unbelievable. It's just extraordinary. And Robert Kennedy Jr. is absolutely right on the button about all of it.
Yep.
And he's the only one actually talking the talk, who's not been co-opted completely and controlled completely by the trillions of dollars that are running the entire industry. But people are waking up, I think, to an extent. And
at some point, I think I said at some point, I think that because as you have these all-encompassing digital age we have with the social media and obviously just the internet itself, at some point I don't think you can keep up the facade for only so long in terms of if most people are being denied.
Lincoln said it best. You can fool some of the people some of the time. You can fool some of the people all the time. You can't fool all the people all the time.
Right. Because they've been fooling a lot of people for a long time. But at some point, because I mean, we talked about the disparity of wealth, and disparity of wealth is worse than ever. I talk about the invisible half of America, the bottom 50%, which makes less than $30,000 a year and has less than 1% of the wealth collectively. That's half of your country.
Collectively, less than 1%.
Yeah.
Are you joking?
Nothing, and that's half. How do you have a first world country?
I know.
It's like we treat it like the dirt, in the house, or you sweep it under the rug. People don't see it, and it's I don't know how you can, but it's getting harder out, especially in your old robbing grounds out in California, where they're just ignoring it. I guess where you have people in the tents and they're crapping on the streets and they're not even cleaning it up. I mean, this is it's unthinkable. I mean, when you were out in LA,
to say nothing of this invasion from the south, and it is an invasion. I mean, no question about it. No, the entire thing has to be really looked at quite. Yeah, and I think a mind like Robert Kennedy Jr. is the kind of mind that could actually make a difference, a real difference, in transforming. It's all about the essential energy. It's all about the frequency of a place. But the first thing that that is absolutely has to be addressed is drugs, both pharmaceutical and street drugs, all of it. Because it's altering the body, it's altering the mind, it's altering the soul.
But especially in something like Hollywood, because most of us think, okay, these guys are leading the dream existence. Why would you? But it's so prevalent out there. It's like, what's the hurt there? What's causing the pain that you have to anesthetize it? I have to drink. I have to take drugs. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman was a heroin addict, and this guy was a great character actor.
But it's across the board, Don. Across the board, it ain't just Hollywood. It's America. It's in the heart of America. It's the devastated heart of America. Something has happened. I think part of it is maybe the fact that the expectation, the dreams, and the hopes of the individual, the average common man, is it's really pretty simple. It's really pretty simple. All they want to have is a good life. Get married. Meet a woman or a man that they can connect to, have children. Go to work, watch their children grow up. They want life itself, and that's all been all pulled out in a sense into super fluorescent outer space, etc., or you're nothing.
Well,
And
tying a couple of these things
self-
together, GTA Philadelphia in the chat room says RFK Jr. was able to recover from heroin abuse. That shows character. That's true. I mean, he's on the record. That's you don't find that too often. Someone that I think speaks a lot for his character.
He's gone through the belly of the beast, as I have and others. They've gone through the only people that really understand, the people who understand, have gone through the belly of the beast of addiction. And whether it's alcoholism, like in my case, or drugs or whatever, any kind of addiction, it's like the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha, first noble truth is life is suffering. Well, what does that mean? It means suffering is life. What is suffering? Well, it means change. And then he says clearly, second noble truth, the cause of all suffering is desire, attachment, entanglement, addiction. And then he says, third noble truth, there is release from suffering. Fourth noble truth makes it real clear. Right thought, right action, right work. Well, let's go to right thought, shall we? Shall we talk about education? Shall we talk about, what is rewarded in education for the sake of education? If you were a bookish fellow in school, and you'd be taunted and say, you think you're so smart, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then you make the football better. He's the hero. Who gets the girl, all that, in group, out group, right. I'm black, I'm white, I'm green, and so forth and so on. Total disintegration. But central concepts are no longer, which were, by the way, part of America. America was one of the most educated countries on earth at one time. I mean, the founders, Jefferson kept the meditations of Marcus Aurelius by his bedside. I'd like to know what book George Bush kept by his bedside, or Ronald Reagan, or any of these guys. Have you read that book? It is unbelievable.
No, I'm not. I love Jefferson, but I haven't done that.
he kept it by the bedside, man. Franklin was a scientist. These guys were just brilliant men, and men of courage and all that. Well, it's the fatted calf syndrome. America became so powerful, so rich, so fat, right? What goes up has to come down. That's the nature of existence. The issue is finding the middle path, right? Finding the correct, logical, not, common sense. Well, what the hell does that mean, common sense? But, it's basic stuff, kids, and here's the thing. We have this, an alcoholic has what we refer to as a disease of perception. The inability to actually see what's there. Well, when an entire nation suffers from a disease of perception, having been brainwashed in many ways by television and by this thing, well, and you've lost the basics, like get up in the morning, work hard, sweat, use your body, use your mind, appreciate. When you lose all that stuff, and then you have to go to higher and higher frequencies like drugs and all that to get a high, and then more and more money. It's out of control. So it's an ethical issue, I think. And by ethical, I don't mean like you like force somebody to to be a quote morality. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about balance. The universe works. Nature works. Everything works ethically. It works in balance. The only thing that's out of whack is mankind.
Yeah.
So we make movies to try to remedy that stuff, I guess, and write books and write poetry and dance and do the best we can.
You do it all. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I want to give you time to talk about anything else you want to talk about. I don't want you to miss the chance. Whatever you want to talk about.
I never understood calculus. I have to confess.
I never got to calculus. I think it was algebra part 2 trigonometry was as high as I got. I didn't get to calculus.
I've never gotten calculus. I can't figure it out. I've been trying to figure it out my whole life. I don't know how Newton did it. I can't figure it out, man. I'm just, I want to say is just the people out there is just, maintain hope. keep hope alive, as I've said, and all that, and know that there is a higher power, there is God, there is a kind of consciousness in this universe. What Buckminster Fuller referred to as omnidirectional, omniscient, ever regenerative, non-simultaneous, partially overlapping, and I add the word ever-loving universe. Oh
Yeah.
God, I'm such an idiot. Anyway,
Well, no, you're a renaissance, and people are getting the sense of that. I can see from the comments in the chat
I do
room and everything.
paint. It is true. I do paint.
Well,
And,
you're right.
and by
You
the way,
paint.
folks, I'm selling my paintings. If you'd like to buy them, you go on artmajour.com and I'll sell you a painting, okay, at a reasonable price. And I sell my signatures and whatever else I can do at my advanced age. But I like to do. Yes, I write poetry, and I have published books on poetry, and I still write. I still write poetry. I write plays.
Right.
Two of my plays are apparently going to be done at the National Theatre in Romania. They've translated them. One is on the life of Eleonora Duse, the great Italian actress, mentioned only once by Barbara Streisand in her Oscar acceptance speech, and another and the other is the adaptation of Socrates. And it's interesting because I've written a play called Death of Socrates and Other Monologues, and it's about an actor, i.e. a TV actor, who goes back to Broadway, off Broadway, to do real theater again. And he's having all these struggles and fights, loses marbles, and he goes on the street. And then I go see Birdman, and I did 2 readings of it, one in New York and LA. And there it is, my story, except, I didn't have. So the important thing is this. The only thing I think really is to try to just, do 360 on stuff, and open the doors, open the windows, let the light in, let the air flow through, a little bit.
Well, you're living in such a historic place, and I just want to get the audience to get a sense of. We talked about this before, but when you're in Paris, you can tell you're in a first world country. I can't. I'm living outside of Washington, D.C. I can't tell. I mean, their potholes are everywhere. Cynthia McKinney told me a few years ago she drove across France and didn't hit a single pothole. That's a difference.
There's a big difference here because, France went through the revolution like America. It was the bloodiest revolution in history. And they learned their lesson about the nature of, you might say, responsibility and equality, one man to another human being. And I think that's in the fabric of this place, especially after Napoleon came in. They set up a system where basically, the main thing is this. A society, by the way, treats its children and its artists. And there are children everywhere. The children, the families are still here and all that, and artists are respected here. And I don't know, that's something pulled me here, and here I am. I'm alive. As you know, Donald, I almost died. I went through it, 7 years of almost dying. I've been recovered. I am now back, and I'm going to keep going forward into the great unknown. So thank you, Donald. Thank you for inviting me. And, it's nice to talk about myself for an hour.
You've had such a fascinating life. And those of us that are sitting here, I mean, I'm a big movie buff. I love old films. I love pre-code talkies. I know it, like I know the old baseball statistics, and it's meeting people that have actually worked there. I mean, you started opposite Raquel Welch. You were with Andrea Martin.
I worked with Raquel Welch. I worked with Sophia Loren. I worked with.
Geez. Every man can sit here and just think, "Wow!" I mean,
I worked with Kim Basinger. I worked with
and you
Michelle
got paid to do it.
Yes, exactly. And I got paid to go to bed with Raquel Welch. I worked with Catherine Deneuve. I worked with, and then I worked, of course, with Charlton Heston. I've worked with just about everybody in the business. I didn't work with De Niro. Didn't work with Pacino. Would have been great, but then I certainly did not meet my hero, which was, I had 2. One was Marlon Brando, of course, and the other was John Cassavetes. And unfortunately, I met neither. But I did work with his actors. I worked with Ben Gazzara. I worked with all of them except for Gina Rollins, and I worked with just about everybody in Hollywood. I went, as Glenn Larson said about me, the famous producer of Magnum and all that, who wanted me to do a series. He said, "You're Hollywood's best kept secret," and that is true. I am. I'm Hollywood's best kept secret. I got a chance and an opportunity to
You are.
experience it
You're
all.
wonderful.
Yeah.
You're wonderful, and we're just about out of time. But I just, Nick
Thank
Mancuso.
you.
I'm so honored to call you a friend and to know that you will come on my
Thank you,
little
Don. Thank
podcast
you.
and talk. You're a true Renaissance man, and they don't make them like you anymore. Brilliant conversation. You
Thank you,
elevated
Don.
everyone's IQ by a couple of points just listening to it. So thanks so much, Nick. Well, we'll have to talk again soon. And
all I can say in the words of Mo, and Curly, spread out. Anyway.
Thanks again. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening to I Protest. We'll talk to you next week, same time. Take care.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Take care.